I always thought if my marriage ended, it would be with shouting, maybe even tears. But when I walked into our bedroom that evening, the only sound was the sharp rip of packing tape slicing through the silence. For a second, I thought I had the wrong house. The room looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. It was colder, emptier. And then I saw her. Julia, my wife. She was standing in front of the bed, methodically sealing boxes, her face blank as she pressed down strip after strip of tape. Neat, labeled boxes, arranged with the same meticulous precision she brought to everything. Summer clothes, winter clothes, office supplies, important documents. She hadn't even noticed me yet. Or maybe she had and just didn't care. I leaned against the doorway, crossing my arms, waiting. I wanted to see how long it would take for her to acknowledge me. She never did. Not until I finally spoke. You were going to leave without telling me? My voice came out steadier than I felt. Julia startled slightly, her fingers tightening around the roll of tape. A small reaction, but it was there. She let out a slow breath and turned toward me, her expression controlled. Nathan, we both knew this was coming. There was no guilt in her voice, no regret, just a quiet finality that settled into my bones like ice. Did we? Because I sure as hell hadn't known. I stepped into the room, the heels of my shoes clicking against the hardwood. Each step felt heavier than the last, like I was walking through wet cement, dragging myself towards something inevitable. I glanced down at the boxes again, noting the careful handwriting on each label. When had she done this? How long had she been planning it? I swallowed the bitter taste in my mouth. When were you going to tell me? She hesitated. Not long, but long enough for me to catch it. I was going to. When? I pressed. She turned away and reached for another box, pretending to be busy, as if sealing away the last 7 years of our marriage was just another chore to check off her list. I don't want to fight, Nathan. I laughed. A hollow, humorless sound. Oh, that's convenient. You don't want to fight, so you just pack up your life and walk out while I'm at work? She sighed, rubbing her temple like I was a headache she just couldn't get rid of. Dragging this out won't change anything. Dragging this out, like I was some embarrassing scene she wanted to avoid. The anger simmered beneath my skin, but I didn't let it show. Not yet. Instead, I reached for the nearest box. Winter clothes. I ran my fingers over the label, tracing the ink. She had packed for every season, every possible future. One that didn't include me. Tell me something, I said, lifting the box just enough to make her watch. When exactly did we decide this? Because I must have missed that conversation. Her lips pressed together. Nathan. No. Seriously. Enlighten me. She exhaled, slow and measured, like she was talking to a difficult child. That was when I saw it. The glance. A flicker of her eyes toward her phone on the nightstand. It was quick, subtle, but I caught it. She was waiting for something, or someone. My chest tightened as I reached for the phone. She lunged for it, but I was faster. The screen lit up with a single unread message. From Mom. Margaret Whitmore. And just like that, everything clicked. Of course, Julia wasn't leaving me. Not really. She was being removed. I stared at the screen, my pulse pounding in my ears. Julia grabbed the phone from my hand, holding it to her chest like I was going to steal it. For the first time, she looked nervous. Good. Tell me, Julia, I said, my voice dangerously calm. Did you ever make a single decision in our marriage without running it by her first? She bristled. That's not fair. I let out a slow breath, rolling my shoulders back, feeling the weight of the moment settle into place. Fair. I repeated, nodding to myself. Fair would have been a conversation. Fair would have been telling me this was happening before I walked in and found you packing your life into neatly labeled boxes. She said nothing, and that was enough. Silence was an answer. Silence told me this wasn't just a breakup. This was an extraction. Margaret had always hated me. She thought I wasn't good enough for Julia, that I wasn't Whitmore material. She saw me as temporary, a mistake her daughter would eventually outgrow. Looks like she got her wish. Or at least, she thought she did. Because I wasn't going to make this easy for them. I took a step forward, closing the space between us. Julia shifted uncomfortably, but held her ground. How long? I asked, softer now. Nathan. How long? She swallowed. A few months. I let out a slow breath, nodding. Right. And let me guess, this was never really your idea, was it? She opened her mouth to argue but hesitated. Because we both knew the answer. I shook my head. You know what the worst part is? I murmured. It's not even that you're leaving. It's that you don't even have the guts to own it. She flinched. I looked back at the boxes. The perfectly labeled, meticulously packed boxes. Everything in order. Everything planned. But she hadn't planned for me. She hadn't planned for me walking in on this. And she sure as hell hadn't planned for what I was going to do next. I met her eyes, my voice low. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. And she had no idea. Not yet. But she would. I didn't realize how deep it went. Not at first. At first, I thought it was just Julia. That she had checked out of our marriage, packed her bags, and made a quiet exit. But then I found the folder. It wasn't even hidden, which told me she never expected me to find it. It sat there, tucked neatly beside a half-filled suitcase, looking like any other piece of paperwork she had organized for her move. A folder so ordinary, so intentional, that it made my stomach turn. I almost didn't pick it up. Almost. But my gut told me something was off. And I'd learned a long time ago to trust that feeling. So, I reached for it. The moment I flipped it open, my blood ran cold. Inside were documents. Not just any documents. My documents. Bank statements. Credit card transactions. Work emails. A full breakdown of my personal finances, investments, and income sources. Photos. Some of them were of me at work. Others showed me walking out of restaurants, meeting with friends, even leaving the gym. Who had taken them? And why? I felt my pulse pounding in my ears as I flipped through the pages. It was too organized, too methodical. At the bottom of the last page, the signature told me everything I needed to know. Margaret Whitmore. Julia's mother. Of course. My grip on the folder tightened. Margaret had never liked me. From the day I met her, she had looked at me like I was an outsider. Like I had stolen her daughter from the life she had planned for her. She came from old money, a woman who believed in legacy, reputation, control. And she had never controlled me. That was the problem. She tolerated me at first, I think. Maybe she even believed Julia's love for me was a phase. But then we got married, and I became permanent. And Margaret? She wasn't the kind of woman who left loose ends. I glanced up at Julia, still packing, still pretending not to see me holding her mother's folder of evidence against me. The betrayal settled in my chest like lead. You knew about this, I said, my voice eerily calm. Julia froze for a second, just a second, before recovering. Nathan, put that down. So that's a yes. Her lips pressed together, like she was debating whether to keep lying. I flipped through the pages again, slower this time, my eyes scanning the careful notes written in the margins. There was a full financial risk analysis of me. Margaret had broken down my income stability, credit score, and professional growth. She had compared it to Julia's earnings, highlighting areas where I was less secure, less reliable, less valuable. And at the very end, Margaret had added a handwritten note. Your future should be built on certainty, not risk. Do what needs to be done. I let out a slow, bitter laugh. Wow. Julia still hadn't moved. She was watching me now, wary, like she wasn't sure which version of me she was about to get. Good. She should be afraid. I looked back at the photos. How long has she been having me followed? I asked. Silence. I lifted my eyes to hers, holding her gaze. Julia. She swallowed. A few months. A few months. I let that sink in. She had been watching me, studying me, gathering proof that I wasn't good enough. And Julia had let her. My wife. The woman I trusted. The woman who vowed to stand by me. She had handed me over to be evaluated. Like I was some goddamn investment risk. I closed the folder, slowly, my fingers pressing against the cover. I wasn't angry. Not yet. What I felt was colder. It was the kind of calm that settled deep in your bones right before a storm. Julia finally stepped forward, her voice careful. Nathan, please. This isn't what you think. Isn't it? She was just worried about me. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Worried? I lifted the folder. This isn't worry, Julia. This is an investigation. She winced. You know how she is. Yeah, I said flatly. I do. And I know you let her do this. Which means I need to start asking myself a different question. Julia looked at me warily. What question? I set the folder down on the bed. How long has she been planning this? She said nothing, which was the worst answer of all. I took a slow step forward. Did you ever love me, Julia? Or was I just a mistake your mother needed to clean up? Her breath hitched, her hands clenching at her sides. Don't say that. Why not? Because it's not true. I nodded toward the folder. That says otherwise. She took a shaky breath. Nathan, A buzz from her phone cut her off. She flinched. I didn't need to ask who it was. I already knew. I reached for the phone again, but this time, she snatched it away before I could grab it. The air between us was thick, suffocating. This was it. This was the moment our marriage truly ended. Not with the quiet packing of boxes. Not with hushed conversations and gentle heartbreak. It ended with a mother who had already decided how this story should go, and a wife who let it happen. I exhaled slowly, steadying myself. Then I turned, grabbing the folder, and walked toward the bedroom door. Julia's voice wavered behind me. Nathan, please. Let's just. I stopped, gripping the doorframe. Then I looked back over my shoulder, meeting her gaze one last time. You should call your mother, I said quietly. Tell her she just made the biggest mistake of her life. And then I walked out. Because this war? It was just getting started. I walked out of the bedroom and into the hallway, gripping the folder so tightly my knuckles ached. The air in the house felt different now. Heavier, tainted with something I hadn't noticed before. Maybe it was betrayal. Maybe it was the weight of realization settling into my bones. Julia had been planning this. Not just for weeks. Not even for months. For a long time. I should have seen it earlier. The careful way she'd been withdrawing from me. Subtle, but intentional. The half-hearted kisses. The last-minute cancellations of our dinner plans. The sudden insistence that we needed space. It was never about space. It was about creating distance. So that when she left, it wouldn't feel so jarring. So sudden. She wanted the break to be clean. But it wouldn't be. Not now. Not after this. Behind me, I could hear her footsteps. Hesitant. Careful. Good. She was finally afraid. Where are you going? Julia asked, her voice carrying just the right amount of forced control. Like she was trying to smooth things over before they spiraled completely out of reach. I turned at the base of the stairs, staring at her like I was seeing her for the first time. You really thought I wouldn't find it? I held up the folder. She pressed her lips together, but she didn't deny it. That was her second mistake. The first was letting me find it in the first place. What are you going to do? She asked softly. I let out a slow breath, shaking my head. I don't know, Julia. What do you think I should do? She hesitated, wringing her hands together. Guilty. Nervous. But not sorry. Not yet. Look, this has nothing to do with me. I cut her off. That's an interesting take, considering it's my life in this folder. My finances. My movements. My career. She flinched. I took another step down the stairs, but I wasn't leaving. Not yet. Tell me, Julia, I said, my voice quieter now, sharper. What was the plan here? Were you just going to pack up, disappear, and let your mother handle the rest? Her face twisted with something close to frustration. You're twisting this into something it's not. I laughed, a short, bitter sound. I don't have to twist anything, Julia. The evidence is right here. I waved the folder slightly. Your mother spent months, maybe years, tracking my every move. And you let her. Silence. She didn't deny it. And that was the third mistake. You knew, I continued, my voice eerily calm. You knew what she was doing, and you let her do it. No protests. No arguments. You just stood back and let her dig up dirt on your own husband. Her lips parted like she wanted to argue, but no words came out. And then, finally, she exhaled shakily and whispered, I didn't know it was this deep. I scoffed. That's not an excuse. That's an admission of guilt. She took a step forward. Nathan, please. Stop saying my name like that. Her mouth snapped shut. For the first time since I walked in, since I saw those packed boxes, I was the one in control. And she knew it. I nodded toward the folder in my hands. What was the plan after you left? Was your mother going to use this to make sure I walked away with nothing? To make sure I didn't fight the divorce? Her expression told me everything I needed to know. It was never just about leaving me. It was about erasing me. You just made the biggest mistake. I murmured, almost to myself. Julia stiffened. What does that mean? I took another step down the stairs, this time with real purpose. She moved quickly, blocking the doorway. Nathan, please. Can we just talk about this before you? Before I what? I tilted my head. Before I fight back? She flinched. I let out a slow breath, lowering my voice. Let me tell you exactly what's about to happen. Julia swallowed hard, but she didn't move. You and your mother thought you could plan this down to the last detail, didn't you? I gestured around the house. You thought I'd walk in, accept my fate, and quietly disappear while you took everything. The house, the accounts, my reputation. Her throat bobbed with a hard swallow. But you underestimated me. I took a step closer, lowering my voice to a near whisper. And you overestimated her. Julia inhaled sharply. See, Margaret has spent so much time watching me, analyzing me, that she never considered one thing. I smiled, slow and cold. I can watch her too. Julia took a step back. And there it was. Fear. Not just of me. Of what I could do. I adjusted my grip on the folder, nodding toward it. This isn't just my life in here. You know that, right? She hesitated. What do you mean? I smirked. You really think I'm the only one Margaret has been keeping tabs on? That was when she paled. I turned toward the door again. This time, she didn't stop me. And I knew then, I had already won. I walked out of the house with the folder in my hand and fire in my chest. Julia had let her mother plan everything. Every move, every step, every calculated detail. I wasn't just supposed to lose my wife. I was supposed to disappear. They thought they had it all figured out. But they made a mistake. They gave me time. I slid into my car, gripping the steering wheel as I stared at the folder on the passenger seat. My pulse was steady now, too steady, like my body had already accepted that this wasn't about grief anymore. This was war. I didn't call Julia. I didn't call Margaret. I called my lawyer. Ryan, I said when he picked up, my voice sharp, controlled. I need you to meet me at your office. Now. He hesitated for only a second. Nathan, it's late. I don't care. Another pause. Then a sigh. Fine. I'll be there in 20. I hung up without another word and started the car. Margaret wanted to ruin me? She was about to find out exactly what that felt like. Ryan's office was downtown, a sleek glass building that felt cold and detached. The kind of place where deals were made, lives were changed, and people walked in married but walked out broken. He was already waiting when I arrived, a half-empty coffee cup in his hand. You look like hell, he said, shutting the door behind me. I dropped the folder onto his desk. Read it. Ryan frowned but didn't argue. He flipped it open, his eyes scanning the pages in that quick, sharp way lawyers do when they're searching for something specific. Something damning. Halfway through, he let out a low whistle. Well, this is a lot. Understatement. He flipped another page, eyebrows rising. Jesus, this is your wife's mother? Margaret Whitmore. The name alone left a bitter taste in my mouth. Ryan leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen against the desk. She's got money, connections. If she wanted to destroy you, she'd have the resources to do it. She thought she destroyed me. Ryan's lips twitched. You're sitting in my office, so clearly, she didn't. I leaned forward. I want to hit back, and I don't want to do it quietly. Ryan exhaled, setting the pen down. Okay, let's talk options. What do you want? That was the question, wasn't it? I could fight for the house, the accounts, the life they thought they could take from me. But that wasn't enough. I didn't want to just fight. I wanted to take something from them, and I knew exactly where to start. I tapped the folder. Margaret's been tracking me, but she's also been covering her own tracks. Look at page 20. Ryan flipped to the page. His eyes widened slightly. Well. Now this is interesting. She's been funneling money into shell companies, moving assets around to avoid taxes. That alone is enough to sink her. I paused. But that's not the best part. Ryan looked up. There's more? I smirked. She used Julia's name for some of the transfers. Ryan blinked. Wait. Are you saying your wife is financially tied to her mother's shady dealings? Oh, I'm not saying it, I said smoothly. Margaret is. In her own handwriting. Ryan let out a low chuckle. Oh man, that's beautiful. It was. Margaret had been so focused on destroying me that she had left her own daughter vulnerable. And now? That was exactly what I was going to use. By morning, the first move was in play. I had Ryan freeze all joint assets, accounts, investments, even Julia's personal savings. If she wanted to leave, she was leaving with nothing. Then, I sent an anonymous tip to Margaret's business partners. Not everything. Not yet. Just enough. Enough to make them nervous. Enough to make them question whether Margaret was the kind of person they wanted to be financially tied to. And then, just for good measure, I sent Julia a text. Check your bank account. It took less than 2 minutes for my phone to start ringing. I let it go to voicemail. Then I called someone else. Thomas Chun. Thomas was a real estate investor. Margaret's biggest competitor. She had spent years trying to push him out of deals, convincing the city board that her developments were more prestigious. It worked. Until now. I met Thomas 2 years ago at a conference. We were casual acquaintances, nothing more. But that didn't matter. What mattered was that Thomas hated Margaret. And now, I had something he wanted. When he picked up, I didn't bother with small talk. Thomas, I said, my voice steady. How would you like to take everything from Margaret Whitmore? There was a pause. Then a slow, amused chuckle. Nathan, my friend, you have my attention. By noon, I finally answered Julia's calls. I didn't even say hello. What the hell did you do? She snapped the moment I picked up. Just leveling the playing field, I said casually. You froze my accounts. You mean the accounts your mother was planning to use to secure her investments after she threw me under the bus? Silence. Yeah, I said. Funny how that works. I could hear her breathing, sharp and uneven. Nathan, this is what happens when you make a mistake, Julia. She exhaled shakily. You don't have to do this. I laughed, but it was hollow. Oh, but I do. Because you didn't just leave me. You tried to erase me. And now? I leaned back in my chair. Now, I'm erasing you. Another silence. Longer this time. And then, finally, her voice. Small, uncertain. Where does this end? I smiled. It ends, I said, when your mother finally learns what losing feels like. And then I hung up. Because the first strike had already landed. And the storm? It was just beginning. By the time Julia and Margaret realized what was happening, it was too late. I sat in my office, sipping my coffee, watching my phone light up with calls from numbers I had long since saved for exactly this moment. Margaret's lawyer, Julia's financial advisor, and of course, Julia herself. I ignored all of them. Because at this point, there was nothing left to say. They thought they had this planned, that they had set the perfect trap, wrapped up in neat paperwork and cold calculations. But they forgot something important. I had spent years in their world, watching, learning, understanding exactly how their games were played. They thought I was just a husband. They never realized I had been a student. And today, I was going to teach them a lesson. By noon, the real chaos began. It started with Margaret's investors, the ones who had always backed her projects, who trusted her judgment, who believed in her untouchable reputation. That trust? Gone. All it took was a few whispers. A few well-placed concerns about money being shuffled around. About funds going missing. About a certain anonymous tip suggesting legal trouble on the horizon. Investors weren't patient people. The moment they smelled uncertainty, they pulled out. One by one. Margaret's phone must have been ringing off the hook. I pictured her sitting at her polished mahogany desk, watching her empire crumble in real time. And Julia? She was watching her safety net disappear. Because when I froze our accounts, I didn't just stop her from leaving with my money. I stopped her from having any money at all. She was used to comfort, to luxury, to a world where problems could be solved with the right connections and the right checkbook. Now, she was broke. And her mother? She was drowning. The call that changed everything. I finally answered when Julia called again, not because I cared, but because I wanted to hear the panic in her voice. And she didn't disappoint. "You bastard," she snapped the second I picked up. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I took a slow sip of my coffee. "Enlighten me." "You destroyed everything." Her voice cracked. "Do you think this is funny?" I leaned back in my chair, amused. "No, Julia. I think it's justice." She let out a shaky breath, trying to calm herself, but I could hear it. The fear. The realization that she was no longer in control. "You need to fix this," she demanded. "You." I laughed, cutting her off. "Fix this? You can't just—" "Julia," I interrupted, my voice dropping into something cold, something final. "You and your mother thought you could erase me. You thought you could leave and take everything with you. You thought you could control how this ended." She didn't respond. She knew I was right. "So no," I said, my voice sharp as a knife. "I don't need to fix anything, because I didn't break it." She inhaled sharply. "Nathan." I hung up, because I wasn't done yet. The public exposure. Margaret had spent years crafting an image. A perfect businesswoman. A respected investor. A philanthropist who built fortunes instead of ruins. She thought her power was untouchable. So I made sure everyone saw how fragile it really was. The press loved scandals, and Margaret had just handed them the biggest one of the year. I leaked the financial inconsistencies first. Just a whisper. A quiet storm rolling in. And then, once they started digging, I let them find the real dirt. The secret accounts. The shady property deals. The bribes. It was all there. Neatly documented. Waiting for the world to see. And once the first article hit, the floodgates opened. News channels. Social media. Business forums. Margaret Whitmore's perfect reputation was burning. And Julia? She was watching it happen. The fallout. That evening, I got an unexpected visitor. Julia. She stood outside my door. Hair a mess, eyes red-rimmed from anger or tears. I didn't care. For a second, I just stared at her. This was the same woman who stood in our bedroom and packed her life away like I was a temporary inconvenience. The same woman who had been so sure that leaving me was her victory. Now, she looked defeated. She swallowed hard. "Can I come in?" I leaned against the doorway, crossing my arms. "Why?" "Because we need to talk." I studied her, amused. "That's funny. I don't remember you wanting to talk when you were packing your bags." She winced. "Nathan." "Let me guess." I cut her off. "Your mother sent you here, didn't she?" She flinched. That was all the answer I needed. I chuckled, shaking my head. "Still taking orders, huh?" Her jaw clenched. "This isn't about that." "No?" I raised an eyebrow. "Then why are you here, Julia?" She hesitated, just long enough for me to see the truth. She wasn't here for me. She was here because she had nowhere else to go. I exhaled, stepping back. "You should leave." She blinked. "What?" "You heard me." Her hands curled into fists. "Nathan, I met her gaze, my voice calm. "You chose her." Her breath hitched. "You let her decide what we were worth," I continued. "And now that everything's falling apart, you want to come back?" She was shaking now, gripping the edge of the doorframe. "I didn't think she would." "You didn't think," I agreed. "That's the problem." She inhaled sharply, but I could see it now. The final breaking point. She had lost. And she knew it. I leaned in just slightly, lowering my voice. "Go home, Julia, or wherever you have left." Tears filled her eyes, but I didn't care. She did this to herself, and she would live with it, just like I had. She took a step back, voice shaking. "You'll regret this." I smiled. "No, Julia, you will." Then I shut the door in her face. And for the first time since this all began, I felt free. The day Margaret Whitmore lost everything, the world watched. Her name was everywhere. Headlines, news reports, whispered conversations between people who used to call her an untouchable force in the industry. But no one is untouchable. Not when they've built their empire on lies, manipulation, and stolen power. I sat back in my chair, sipping my coffee as the news anchor recited the latest fallout from the storm I had unleashed. Financial scandal rocks Whitmore Enterprises as key investors pull out following leaked reports of mismanaged funds and fraudulent property deals. Sources confirm that CEO Margaret Whitmore is currently facing multiple legal inquiries. Margaret's worst nightmare was unfolding in real time. Her investors had abandoned her. Her business partners were distancing themselves. And worst of all, her perfect, carefully crafted reputation was crumbling. The woman who once controlled everything and everyone was now fighting to stay relevant. And Julia? She was caught in the wreckage. I made sure of it. Because Margaret hadn't just destroyed herself. She had tied Julia's name to every single financial scheme she had orchestrated. Every fraudulent contract. Every illegal fund transfer. Every shady deal. And now, Julia was drowning with her. The desperation. I knew it was only a matter of time before she called again. And I was right. By noon, my phone rang. I let it ring. Twice. Then, on the third call, I answered. But I didn't say anything. I wanted her to speak first. And after a long silence, Julia finally whispered, "Nathan, please, please." That was new. That was a word Julia Whitmore never used, not with me. Not when she thought she was winning. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice calm. Another pause. Then, "We need to talk." I almost laughed. "Now you want to talk?" "Nathan, please." "This isn't." She let out a shaky breath. I didn't know what my mother was doing. I scoffed. "You did. You just didn't care until it backfired." She exhaled sharply. "Nathan, I'm serious." "So am I." Another silence. Then, softer. "Can we meet?" I glanced at the clock. Margaret's fall from grace was happening faster than I expected. And Julia? She was running out of options. I smiled to myself. "Fine," I said. "Meet me at the cafe on 3rd. 30 minutes. And then I hung up. Because I wanted her to sweat. Julia looked different when I saw her. Not the confident, self-assured woman I once knew. Not the calculating strategist who had packed her bags while I was at work, thinking I'd roll over and accept it. She looked lost. Her hair was messy, her hands fidgeting with the coffee cup in front of her. For the first time, she wasn't in control. And she hated it. I slid into the seat across from her, leaning back. "You wanted to talk." "Talk." She swallowed hard. "Nathan, Let me guess," I interrupted, resting my elbow on the table. "You're here because everything's falling apart, and now you need help." She flinched. I tilted my head. "Tell me, Julia, if your mother's plan had worked, if I had walked away quietly, would we be sitting here right now?" Her lips parted, but she said nothing. And that was my answer. I chuckled, shaking my head. "Exactly." Julia looked down at her cup, shoulders slumping. "I didn't want this." "You wanted a clean break." I folded my hands together. "And you almost got one. But you and your mother forgot something." She hesitated. "What?" I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice. "Me." She exhaled shakily. "Nathan, You let her do this," I said, cutting her off. "You let her follow me, track my finances, turn my own wife against me. And you never once thought about what would happen if I fought back." Her jaw clenched. "I wasn't trying to hurt you." I let out a quiet laugh. "That's the problem, Julia. You thought you could destroy my life without consequences. And now that it's your life falling apart, you suddenly care?" She squeezed her hands together, her breath unsteady. I leaned back. "Tell me what you really want, Julia." She hesitated. Then, finally, in a voice so small I barely recognized it, "I need help." I smiled. "You do?" I agreed. "But not from me." Her head snapped up, panic flickering in her eyes. "Nathan, you chose your side, Julia." I shrugged. "Now you get to live with it." She swallowed hard, her hands gripping the edge of the table. "Please." That word again. The word that had never belonged to Julia Whitmore. And yet, here we were. But I wasn't here to save her. She had made her bed. Now she could lie in it. I stood, reaching into my pocket and tossing a 20 on the table. For the coffee, I said, since I know you can't pay for it anymore. Her breath hitched, tears welling in her eyes. But I wasn't moved. I walked toward the door, then paused, glancing back over my shoulder. Tell your mother I said hello, I added. Then I walked out, and I didn't look back, because Julia wasn't my problem anymore. The world Margaret Whitmore built was falling apart, and I made sure she felt every second of it. It was poetic, really. She spent years controlling people, deciding who was worthy, who got to succeed, who got left behind. Now, she was the one being left behind, by her investors, by her business partners, by her own daughter. And I had front row seats to the show. The power shift. I leaned back in my chair, sipping my coffee as my phone vibrated with yet another news alert. Whitmore Enterprises faces major legal battle following financial fraud allegations. Sources say CEO Margaret Whitmore no longer trusted by key investors. Stock plummets as Whitmore Empire struggles to recover from scandal. The headlines kept coming, one after another, each one driving another nail into her coffin. And Julia? She was drowning in the wreckage. I had made sure of it. She thought she was walking away from our marriage with a clean slate, that she could let her mother handle the details, wipe me out, and start fresh. Now, she was broke. Her mother's name was ruined. And every person who had once treated her like royalty was now avoiding her calls. Because no one wanted to be associated with a falling dynasty. That's the thing about power. People only respect it when you have it. And Margaret? She didn't have it anymore. The final attempt. The first time Julia showed up at my door, I didn't answer. The second time, I made sure she could hear me laughing before I walked away. But the third time, I let her in. Not because I cared, but because I wanted to see how badly she had fallen. She stood in the doorway, looking nothing like the woman who had once packed her bags so confidently. Her clothes were wrinkled. Her hair was pulled into a messy ponytail. And her eyes? Desperate. It was the first time I had ever seen Julia Whitmore beg. Please, Nathan, she whispered. Just hear me out. I leaned against the door frame, arms crossed. You have 5 minutes. She swallowed hard, stepping inside. I could tell she had rehearsed this. The way she carefully chose her words, trying to appeal to the man she thought I still was. Too bad for her. That man was gone. I know you hate me, she started. I raised an eyebrow. Hate is a strong word. She flinched. But I wasn't wrong. Hate meant I still cared. And I didn't. Not anymore. She let out a shaky breath. I didn't know everything my mother was doing. I swear. I scoffed. Bullshit. Nathan, You let her spy on me, I said coldly. You let her ruin my business. You let her make decisions about our marriage without ever telling me the truth. And now that it's your life falling apart, you suddenly want to make things right? She looked down, her fingers twisting together. She was breaking. Good. You have no idea what it's been like, she whispered. I let out a low chuckle. Oh, you mean being powerless? Watching someone else control your life? Yeah, Julia. I know exactly what that's like. She inhaled sharply, eyes glistening with something that almost looked like regret. Almost. But regret didn't erase what she did. Nothing would. She stepped closer. I don't know what to do. I tilted my head. And you think I do? Her breath hitched. Nathan, please. I held up a hand. Stop. She froze. I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. You don't get to come here and ask me to save you. She blinked rapidly, trying to hold back tears. You made a choice, I continued. You chose her. You let her dictate every part of our lives, and when I finally fought back, you expected her to protect you. A tear slipped down her cheek, and I felt nothing. You don't understand, she whispered. I scoffed. No, you don't understand. Your mother built her empire by controlling people. But once you start losing control, you start losing everything. And now? I gestured toward the door. She's lost. And so have you. She opened her mouth, probably to argue, to beg, to manipulate. But I was done listening. I took a step forward, lowering my voice. You didn't just lose me, Julia. She swallowed hard. You lost everything. And for the first time in her life, I think she finally understood. That was the real fallout. Not just the money. Not just the reputation. She lost herself. And she had no one to blame but her mother. And herself. The walk away. I stepped back, nodding toward the door. You should go. Her breath caught. Nathan. You wanted a clean break, I said simply. Now you have one. Her face crumbled. Because for the first time in her life, she had nothing left to say. She walked to the door slowly, pausing for just a second. I didn't move. I didn't soften. I didn't care. She turned back, whispering, I never meant to hurt you. I smiled. That's the problem, I said. You never thought about me at all. Then I shut the door. And this time, I didn't look back. Because some things aren't worth saving. Some people aren't worth forgiving. And Julia? She was both. I didn't celebrate when the storm settled. There was no victory toast, no moment where I sat back and smiled, proud of what I had done, because winning didn't feel like I thought it would. I expected satisfaction, closure, maybe even relief. Instead, it just felt empty. Margaret had lost everything. Julia was left with nothing. And me? I was finally free. But the strange thing about freedom? Sometimes it feels lonely. I woke up the next morning to silence. No more calls from Julia. No desperate messages from Margaret's lawyers, trying to negotiate their way out of disaster. The fight was over. I had one. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the folder that had started all of this. The papers inside were still crisp, still filled with the proof of everything they did to me. Everything they thought they could get away with. But now, it didn't matter. Margaret's empire was in ruins. Julia was cut off, and the world had seen the truth. There was nothing left for me to do. No more moves to make. So why did I feel like I was still waiting for something? My phone rang. Ryan, my lawyer. I picked up, exhaling. It's early. You should turn on the news. I frowned. Why? Margaret's making a statement. I grabbed the remote, flipping on the TV. And there she was. Margaret Whitmore, sitting in front of a podium, dressed in one of her signature designer suits. But she looked different. Not the powerful, calculated woman I had fought against for years. She looked tired. The camera zoomed in as she cleared her throat. It is with deep regret that I announce my resignation as CEO of Whitmore Enterprises. I blinked. She resigned? Ryan let out a low whistle. Didn't think she'd go down without a fight. I take full responsibility for recent financial discrepancies within my company. Mistakes were made. Poor choices were taken. And for that, I apologize to my investors, my employees, and the people who have trusted me over the years. I leaned back, arms crossed. She's trying to control the damage. Ryan chuckled. Obviously. But let's be honest, there's nothing left to control. He wasn't wrong. Margaret stepping down wouldn't erase the scandal. Wouldn't bring back her investors. Wouldn't fix her reputation. She was finished. And the best part? She knew it. I only asked that my family be left out of this. My daughter, Julia, has been unfairly dragged into this situation, and I hope the public will respect her privacy as we move forward. I smirked. Of course she'd try to save Julia, because that's all she had left. Ryan let out a sigh. Well, that's that. Looks like you got everything you wanted. I hesitated. Yeah, I said slowly. I guess I did. So why did it feel like I lost something too? The email from Julia. That night, I found myself staring at an unread email. From Julia. I wasn't sure why I opened it. Maybe because part of me wanted to see what she had to say. Maybe because, deep down, I needed to know if she still believed in her mother's lies. The email was short. Nathan, I know I don't deserve a response, but I wanted to say something anyway. You were right. About everything. My mother. The way she controlled me. The way I let her. I spent years thinking she was protecting me, when really, she was just making sure I never had a choice. I didn't see it until it was too late. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to answer. But I hope, someday, you understand that I never meant to hurt you. Julia. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then, without hesitation, I deleted it. Because understanding wasn't the problem. The problem was that Julia had made her choice. And now, I was making mine. I was finally letting go. A different kind of future. 2 weeks later, I packed my own bags. Not because I was running, but because I didn't need to stay. This house, the life I had built with Julia, it wasn't mine anymore. It was just a reminder of what I had lost, of what I had survived. I found an apartment across town. Nothing big, nothing flashy, just something new, something that was mine. As I locked the front door for the last time, I took one final look at the place I used to call home. Then I walked away, and I didn't look back, because for the first time in a long time, I was truly free.